Hey guys, it's Jason Snavely, certified wildlife biologist and founder and president of Drop-Tine Wildlife Consulting, the Drop-Tine Seed Company, and of course, Drop-Tine Podcast.
And I always like to interrupt that now. All right, we're back. The latest Field Notes podcast took off, did super awesome, even overnight. Now, I know that was the first one in a while, but I want to thank Zach Weaver for doing that one and leading off on that series. I actually had some other customers, some existing, others not, call in and say, hey, I have a bunch of questions, and I'm usually close to my studio, so I talked to one of them. I said, hey, do you mind if we record? I wanted to bring in a guest today and do this again. Again, this is the Field Notes from the field. I'm going to bounce around to every state where whitetails exist, because what I hear often is, that looks great, Jason, but you can't do that here in Kentucky, or you can't do that here in Tennessee or Texas or Michigan or whatever state. It doesn't matter. I always hear that. So anyway, with us today, Mr. Dan Very from Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania. So this is going to be one of our Pennsylvania. We'll start right here at home and kind of branch out from here. But Dan with Very Construction, they build stockade buildings, pole barns. Dan actually called me. Dan, you with us?
Yeah, I'm with you, Jason.
Excellent, buddy. So Dan called me and had a bunch of questions, and I was kind of being myself and teasing him a little bit, I think, because he was bringing up some things, and he had some great questions, which is why I picked Dan to do this. And he had some great questions, really about the process, about reload. And I thought, you know what, let's just record a podcast. And we continued to talk. I continued to tease him about watching YouTube, and he's been a good sport. So, Dan, you want to kind of give everybody a brief intro? Have we talked, other than that brief conversation? I haven't fed you questions or paid you or anything, have I?
No, we haven't talked at all, or much about just anything except for that brief conversation we had. And I mean, I really got to call out for you to reach out to me with just emailing you with some questions, and you picked up the phone and called me, and I think it's a great business move.
Well, I appreciate that. Tell us real quick. I think entrepreneurs built the country, and I think they will continue to do so and pull us out of the mess we're in now. What does your business do? I know I kind of introduced it, but go ahead and tell the listeners.
Well, I've been in business. Well, me and my father has been in business for over 50 years, and we basically do pole barns. We do a company named Stockade Buildings is what we put up, and everybody refers them as pole barns. We like to call them post frame buildings. And that's where our livelihood's been.
Good deal. So what regions do you travel in to do that?
We try to stay here in the Northeast PA area, but we do travel out of the area if we need to, or we can always hook them up with somebody up with a building if they're out of the area. So
if anybody calls you from your area and they mention the code Drop-Tine, drop-tine, they get a 30% discount, right?
There you go.
No, we're kidding, by the way. That's not true. All right, well, hey, it's great. I just want to throw this out there. If anybody else, customers or maybe even prospective customers, confused about some of this stuff, heck, I am. So if you want to be on one of these, just shoot me a text, an email, or give me a call and let me know. I think this has been received very well. This sort of platform, this approach. Obviously, podcasters tend to have, the experts on in the field, and I think it's, one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast in the beginning was because of the cool conversations I get to have. I'm surprised my voice is lasting this long today. I think it's really cool. Everybody must be sitting in their house or in their office in January, February, planning, because we've just been blowing up with plans. People call and say, okay, what's new? What do I need to do with this plot? So that's been fun. And that's why you called, right, Dan?
It is. That's exactly why I called. I wanted to learn more about your seed, and that's where we're at.
Good deal. So I know we kind of cheated a little bit. I was like, oh shoot, I was on the road. I couldn't record. But here we are. How did you open that up with our conversation? I can't really remember, to be honest with you.
I think I opened that up with the the buckwheat conversation, because last year I planted straight buckwheat and rolled it down, in the fall to put my fall plot in, or late summer, and wanted it. You were right off the bat saying, well, there was your first mistake with the monoculture. So
yeah, well, no. So first of all, that I love the thought process. I love the fact that people are thinking, whether you call it cover crops or successional plantings, they're thinking ahead and they're starting to plan, right? So
yeah.
I love that. And we have I did it myself. I planted a monoculture buckwheat plot when I knew my roller crimper was coming several years ago, because I knew the folks, there were some other folks at the time telling me that buckwheat was one of the easiest, like at the Rodale Institute, was one of the easiest crops to crimp terminate. And obviously it's fantastic for pollinators, phosphorus sequestration, and it does other amazing stuff in the soil, which we don't have time for in this call. But so I appreciate that. I think that's excellent that people are thinking ahead. And, fall plots always look better even following up a monoculture like that. So I was game for that. But what we talked about was adding a little bit more diversity than just the buckwheat.
Yeah, and where that actually, I believe that actually started there was because I was looking for something to put in now or soon, because I didn't plant my winter rye. I never got a chance to get it in. So now I'm worried about what am I going to do this spring for weed control. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think our conversation really started rolling.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those short-term kind of interim transitional cover crops, because like buckwheat, right, 5 weeks, sometimes less depending on your growing days, and you've got a mature plant. It's a great plant for that, but there are some other species I like to throw in there, oats, peas, and we actually have, I just updated everything on it, a product called Oats and Peas, and depending on where you're at, sometimes we do throw buckwheat and Phacelia and some other products into custom type blend. It's really not custom; it's used a lot, but it's applied to the specific scenario. So again, I think that was, and you might have heard some of that in that last conversation I had with Zach about the buckwheat.
I did. Sometimes it's a little bit hard here to come up with the questions because you answered a lot of them in that with Zach. So.
Yeah. Zach did a great job too of leading into a lot of those questions, and that was my original purpose with doing these field notes. Is, I get so many calls in a day, and I love taking them, love talking to them, but a lot of the same questions kept coming up, right, repetitively. So let's just go ahead and tackle them. So again, I love the idea that people are thinking in sequences like that. But let's start to think diversity. Now, once you start to build better soils, there's nothing wrong at a later date in going in with, maybe not a monoculture, but maybe even a monoculture at times, right? But initially, we're looking to prime the soils, big time prime the soil, the biology in the soils. And, buckwheat is a very low, I think we talked about this, it's a very low carbon to nitrogen ratio. So, that's just a fancy way of saying it's going to break down and, in theory, serve as more of an immediate organic fertilizer, right? So take the let's say cereal rye is a much higher carbon nitrogen ratio. It's thicker stemmed like a straw, and it's going to hang around a lot longer. So, both of them are great for different purposes, right? So the buckwheat's an immediate organic nutrient source. It's going to deteriorate quickly. The microorganisms are going to chew it up. It's going to be gone. The cereal rye is going to hang around longer, so you're not going to use it right away as much from a nutritional standpoint. But it's going to provide soil armor much longer. It's going to provide, obviously, moisture conservation much longer, and obviously weed suppression much longer. So that's why I like to go in with multi-species, because everybody, like on a football team or a hockey team, everybody plays a specific position. So what was your other? I forget your other questions. Don't be bashful, man. Now that we're recording.
Yeah, I was going to go right back to where it all started for me with wanting to plant crops is, I mean, I only have a little 40-acre, wooded area here.
Yeah.
I got about maybe 5.5 acres of plantable ground. Some of that's actually pipeline area. And I'm setting up in the woods one day hunting and like not seeing anything. And I'm getting aggravated. It's like, I really got to get down and put some plots in so I can start drawing the deer to my property. And as soon as hunting season was over, I did one of the worst things you could do is go on YouTube and just started watching, these guys, that do this and give suggestions. And that's where my food plotting started. So I believe I started all wrong. Some of these programs I do watch at YouTube, it definitely did steer me somewhat in the right direction. But obviously I got a lot to learn, and you've been full of information.
Well, no, I know I teased you a lot about YouTube, and I'm not a big fan of those platforms. Just because they're not American, but I do use stuff like that every now and then. I like to learn about economics in my free time and other crazy weird things. So I can watch one economist, and his view is I'm sold. I'm like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. Market's going to crash tomorrow. And then I watched the very next one, and he has the same credentials, just maybe from a different part of the world or whatever. And his opposing view makes complete sense, right? So then I sit back and I observe reality, and I'm like, well, this is what I'm seeing in the real estate market, and this is what I'm seeing in the trucking market, and this is what I'm seeing at Walmart or on the shelves of whatever. All right, this is what I think reality is, and this is what I think the hybrid, the inflection point, and I'm going to go with this, right? So I think, whereas I kind of teased you a little bit, I get it. It's good to go on there and learn in your free time. But a lot of times you have to kind of take that with a grain of salt and really figure out, do their goals and objectives align with mine? I think you mentioned, picking up a strategy on there about planting. You have to help me because I don't really follow this. That's why I rely on, customers and prospective customers who do, and they watch it, they call me. Something about utilizing half of the field for, like perennial or one application, and then splitting the other half, with more from a more, not soil health, but cover cropping and whatever.
Yeah, that was kind of the theory I went with because it seemed like a little bit easier way to at least get started. Is going in there with a glide and killing everything in the spring. And one of the problems I had with that is now I'm setting from May to June or April to June with bare ground, because I killed it off with nothing there. And then I would plant the buckwheat, and then you go in and you split that now with, brassicas maybe on one side and peas and oats on the other. And then later in the year, we go in and, broadcast in some winter rye.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the theory. And it did work well for me. But here again, I didn't get a chance to get that winter rye in. And now I'm standing here with a plot worried about weeds. I took so much time to get rid of the weeds. And so, that's where I'm at with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, that application to me didn't make any sense. I think that's the point where I asked you, well, what are your goals and objectives? I mean, what are you really trying to accomplish? Are you into the regenerative and soil health aspect, or are you just looking to farm conventionally, right? Because to me, splitting it in half seems like a complete waste, a lot of time spent, a complete misunderstanding of how the system truly works. And I don't think you wanted to go out and dump a whole bunch of synthetics in the ground just to spend money and destroy the ecosystem. So we had talked about, let's regenerate, restore, and prime the biology and put diversity in the ground, get a complex rotation going, and still, how many different species, if you were to do that technique or whatever, that application, how many different plant species are you looking at between the two sides? I Again, I'm not
between
really...
the two. Well, on the brassica side, obviously you have your brassica. We didn't even add clover to that, and I know a lot of blends now are adding clover to the brassicas. But on the beans side, or pea side, we'd add peas, maybe some beans, and the oats. So you're looking at maybe 5 total.
So you can have in one field, you can have all of that, whether it's spring, summer, or fall. You can have all of that. So I think that approach suggests to me that someone thinks that they can basically control nature. Again, nature functions. I was on a podcast as a guest the other day. We were talking about the fact that nature functions in wholes and patterns. So the problem I have with science is that wholes have qualities that aren't present in parts. And if you don't believe me, take spring reload, plant it in one section of a, say, 5-acre field, 2.5 acres, and then in the other 2.5 acres, strip out each. You'll have 17 strips. Technically, if you want to be scientific, you would randomly replicate it, but you'll get my point. If you strip out take the 17 species and strip 17 different species alone as a quote-unquote monoculture, those species that are together in the mix, called spring reload, will perform. They will outperform every individual species or every individual strip as it exists alone every time, whether it's drought, hotter, colder, whatever is going on with nature. Those multi-species will most certainly, if they're selected properly, even if they're kind of half selected properly, they will outperform each individual monoculture planting. So I guess that's what, when we talked about that, we had a pretty good discussion. Again, that was definitely shooting from the hip. I wasn't prepared, really. You weren't prepared. So we're trying to recreate it a little bit. I think we're getting it across anyway. But
yeah, and one of the questions there I was getting at, and you said, hey, just shoot it out there, is like it's smother crop. Like the buckwheat is a smother crop. No weed, nothing else should grow too well with the buckwheat, but yet you're putting all this stuff together and you're saying it's growing. It's all coming together.
Yeah,
and,
so
I guess that was one of my questions.
You're
about
right.
Your
Yep.
reload.
I'm glad you brought that up. So I think there's kind of this maybe it's a terminology thing. You have smother crop that we use to smother the weeds, get ahead of the weeds, and then you have allelopathic effect. So, chemicals exude from specific roots, and there's a lot more than we'll ever know, period. But everybody brings up cereal rye, for instance. The brassicas that you mentioned, those particular species and plant functional groups have allelopathic effects and chemicals that they release that basically they're not 100% annihilating everything around them, but they absolutely can find those species and plant functional groups that compete more closely for their resources. So in nature, there's not competition unless a species is competing, or two species are competing for the same resource, whether it's breeding grounds or foraging grounds or whatever. So, there's often some questions that are really good questions, right? Like why are we planting cereal rye with other species that seem like they would compete 100%, other cereal grains or grasses, but yet they seem to be working together in a complementary way. And I'm just like, well, that's nature teaching us that we really don't know as much as we think we know. So that was a good question in that, yeah, buckwheat, when you get those fast growing species that get ahead of, you were talking early spring or late winter, we're trying to get ahead of that weed species profile and get specific species that we can crimp terminate, like buckwheat, oats, peas, that sort of thing. But then you also have those allelopathic chemical or plants that actually get out there and somewhat inhibit the growth of other species. And the brassicas fumigate the snot out of a soil. If you don't believe me, plant fall fuel or 100% brassica blend and go back out late winter, early spring, and you can bounce a basketball in the field because there's nothing left. And we can, whereas we used to look at that and frown, we can now use that to our advantage, playing with carbon nitrogen ratio and plant residue. But very few of us are at that point right now. That'll come later, and we're ready for that. But yeah, that's a very good point on planting the smother crop. And I've had people say, yeah, but you want me to put rye with all of this other stuff, but that's a waste of money because all these other components are not going to grow, and that's just not true. I mean, we put cereal rye and things like fall reload with 12 to 15 other species and varieties, and they all do quite well.
Okay. And one of the other questions I was getting at, now I'm fortunate enough to have a no-till drill. I have a Genesis 3, but I don't have a crimper. I just use a roller. And one of the questions I figured to ask you, and I think that's where we kind of cut our conversation off the other day, is is that okay? I mean, because that's not going to crimp and terminate everything when I go to plant my next, either, if I do get this the spring load in, and if I go to plant my summer or my fall, I'm not going to terminate everything.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, I do sell roller crimpers. They're Drop-Tine black roller crimpers, and Jay, it's no secret, Jake at I&J builds all of my roller crimpers because I feel like they are currently the leader as far as quality. I'm sure there will be some others who catch up, but they've been building them longer than anybody else, so they build mine. And we make them anything from 4 feet, a flip over, 4 and 5 footers for the ATVs, UTVs, right on up to 40, 60, and however wide feet that is wide you need them. But that's a good question. So let's think about what the roller crimper is, right? It's you have certain plants that have hollow stems that when stepped on, once they reach some sort of physiological maturity or near physiological maturity, right? They're either they're flowering or they're going to seed head. So it's an annual. So they're pretty much their cycle's done. They're successful, right? They're going to seed. The plant rushed to get to that point. It's now dead. It's throwing seed. If you step on it, buckwheat's the perfect example. Oats, rye, at the right timing, you can technically crimp terminate it. Now, it was somewhat created. The roller crimper was somewhat created for the organic farmers. It sort of mimics the hoof action of ungulates walking across the field, basically stomping down some species. And obviously, a bison or a cow or whatever deer it's not going to step on every plant in the field. This is going down a whole nother rabbit hole. That's why I tell some clients, listen, I don't care if you don't have a 100% successful crimp termination. We're not going in there with organic beans or organic barley or something like that and looking for a completely clean field. Even those guys are doing that, and they're not, they don't stress out over some of the plants popping back up. But so getting back to your question, when you have those the chevron pattern of extensions on a roller crimper, they act every 7 or so inches to basically crimp it, right? It's almost like you grabbing it in your hands and bending it. Once you do that, certain plants are dead, right? Having said that, I have seen guys drive, cars, pickup trucks, pull, lawn rollers, cultipackers, logs, whatever across a field. There's a lot of good stuff in Africa where they grow this, they're growing regenerative crops, but they're using cover crops and enhancing soils, and they grow this massive squash habitat, and it's really cool because a lot of them don't have roller crimpers, so they're out there driving through or dragging whatever. So yeah, a roller of any sort will definitely work. I don't see why not. I mean, is it ideal to have obviously that chevron pattern and have that, pressure every 7 inches, make sure you crimp terminate that plant? Absolutely. But if your timing is right, using a yard roller, you can have better success crimp terminating than using an expensive roller crimper and having poor timing. It's just a matter of learning what species or multiple species you're out there attempting to crimp terminate and when to hit them. So absolutely, I wouldn't hesitate at all in using a cultipacker or a yard roller or whatever. and the costs of those of roller crimpers, along with everything else in today's massive inflation, they're going up. I mean, it's insane. The price of steel is going through the roof. The shipping to get them to clients is going through the roof. But that is what it is. I can't help you there. I attempted to vote and change that.
Me too. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, last year, this last season, I mean, that being said, I did the buckwheat area, so the roller did just fine with the buckwheat because, I mean, literally, I smashed it down. By the time I was done with the entire food plot, it was already turning yellow where I started. I mean, it died really quick.
Yeah.
So.
And, the other thing, too, with your buckwheat and some other things, oftentimes, the first 2 years I crimped everything. I would crimp ahead and just drill in whatever, season we were in. And then the third year, knowing that I had to throw nature curveballs constantly. I don't like to get caught in cycles and patterns. I want to be diverse, and sometimes I just disrupt what I'm doing and change it up, even if I don't know why I'm doing it. But sometimes I'll just go out there and plant green right into it. You have your drill, so maybe you don't need to crimp it this time. Just run out there and drill right into it. Now, some guys will say, we've learned, in quotes, a lot from the conventional agricultural and farming, but it's time to realize that that crowd has been lied to for so many generations now. That they're brainwashed that they have to feed the world. I don't want my local farmers feeding the world. I want them to feed me and my family. So you can go out there and let's say the buckwheat. The farmers will say once a buckwheat field, always a buckwheat field, and I'm just like, really? Tell me about how you've done. I still haven't driven the countryside and seen a buckwheat only field, and they're all nuking it with every chemical in the world anyway. So why does it matter? To me, I'm like, you realize that farmers, there was a day and time when farmers, their most important or biggest asset was the seed, their seed, right? It wasn't their tractor with yield monitors and, all the expensive equipment that the banks have convinced them they need so they can finance them and make money on them. It was their seed, and they salvaged their seed. They saved their seeds and replanted them year after year, because those seeds started to develop in their environment and became extremely dominant, obviously through, similar to evolution, and they grew really, really well in their environment. So I say to guys, listen, we're planting for wildlife. We're planning to enhance the soil health. If you have some buckwheat that missed the roller crimper or didn't crimp terminate, and it comes back, I'm still waiting for somebody to send me a picture of a field that they keep planting and it's just all full of buckwheat. It doesn't happen that way. If you have volunteer seed in the seed bank, why wouldn't you take it? If buckwheat seed's going to come back later in the summer or later in the growing season or in the spring, why wouldn't you welcome that? That's seed you've paid for once, and you're getting a massive return on that investment, right? So, all of these scare tactics and all these stories about how annual ryegrass is going to take over and buckwheat's going to take over, that's just nonsense. I welcome volunteer buckwheat later in the growing season because it's fertilizer that I planted how many months ago, right? It's going down there to leak a whole completely different profile of organic compounds to a completely different diverse population of microbes that are going to go get me those nutrients and bring them back to my plants. It's ideal to me. Sorry, didn't mean to ramble on that, but
oh no, that's fine because you actually touched on a little bit of my next question. There is ryegrass. I noticed a couple of your blends. You actually have ryegrass in.
Absolutely.
And in the YouTube video world out there, like that's a big no-no. You don't never use ryegrass.
Yeah, they think so.
Rye.
They think so because somebody told them that once, and again, it's all about context, and this is the bad thing about the information world is you're watching somebody in, say, Alabama talk about how bad a species is, and then you're in Michigan or Wisconsin, and you're repeating that instead of recycling content, what I would urge people to do is go out there and try it themselves. And so many times you find out that it's the management, not the plant, right? So depending on where they're at in the country, honestly, the most underutilized, since you brought it up, the most underutilized plant right now in agriculture, food plotting, whatever, is ryegrass, period. It's, you've got these regions of the country where the soils are so far gone and so degraded that they could use ryegrass. There's nothing better for restoring soils, pumping carbon, and building organic matter, which primarily comes from underground root mass, not above ground. That's ryegrass it has a bad name, and I actually have a lot of podcast episodes planned, and that was going to be one of them. It's the management, right? You've heard people say it's not the cow, it's the how, right? It's all about how you manage that plant.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, what my actual goal is here as in the planting is I want to stop spraying and I want to stop fertilizing as much as I can, because to me that's just an extra expense and extra time out there. And I guess, I mean, why is your system the way to go to try to eliminate as much of that as we can?
Yeah, so I think hopefully a lot of my listeners are thinking, it's not Jason's system. Here he goes again. It's nature's system, right? So the reason it's the right way to go is because it's the way nature works. Nature doesn't, nature has chemicals in it, but they leak, exude, come out of roots, period. So, if those are your goals, eliminating or minimizing synthetics and chemicals, etc., this is the only way to go. But it's like I tell people all the time, if you're looking for those monoculture plots, that have, or minimum have 1 or 2 or 3 different species in them, like the brassicas, and some of these guys, they talk about chemicals or they write books about herbicides, and I said to one of them, I got cancer just looking at your book, and I'm not trying to make light of it, but I was just like, holy hell, the stuff that you're spraying, it's like Americans, everything, there's a pharmaceutical for everything now. When I'm watching the news at night, I die, I laugh hysterically. My family thinks I'm crazy, but I'm like, man, we don't even have to do anything anymore. We can consume all the worst things in life, and there's a pill to fix everything. So I guess if you want to farm in nature's image and you want to eliminate those things, stop liming, stop fertilizing, stop spraying, there's no other alternative. You have to think and use your head to make up for all of those cheats. For instance, here's a perfect example. Every year this time of year, I have this conversation at least 15 to 20 times a day with clients or people who aren't even customers. They just looked at the website and thought they'd call. I say, listen, you need to have your drill or what your broadcast seeder ready, now, January, February, whatever. You can't bass fish, you can't mow the lawn. Get out there and get everything ready. If you get behind the 8 ball in the spring, it's game over. You're playing defense all growing season. Now there's a pill for everything. Don't worry about it. You can buy that cheat. You can dump Gly on it. You can dump 2,4-D. And now there's a chemical for everything. But if you use your head and replace the simple, the cheat, you can get ahead of this stuff. You mentioned you didn't get your rye in time. And, obviously if you would have gotten that rye super dense, you'd have that allelopathic effect going on, and you wouldn't need to rely on as much chemical herbicide to get it done. So again, it's not my system. It's not something you have to do. I honestly don't care if you do it or not. The only reason I really care is because for generations now, we have been over-fertilizing. We know now there's 100-year data that shows that at least 40 to 50% of that nitrogen fertilizer that's applied is gone right into the water system. So you could instantly cut your fertilizer in half especially your nitrogen, without seeing any major negative yield drag, as farmers say, or piss poor looking food plots because you only cut it in half, right?
Mm-hmm. So back onto the fertilizer here. I have a question about that. So this, obviously, I'm going to use your product this spring because I didn't get that rye in there. So because I'm kind of really just starting, would you recommend any type of fertilizer onto your product here when I plant it this spring?
You mean with reload specifically, spring reload?
Yeah, with reload.
No,
yeah.
I do not. No, I do not. Now, if somebody wants to do it, here's why. Here's the only time I would probably do it, and we haven't done it to date. If I wanted to get some really great pictures for a hunting show or marketing the website and show people how pretty spring reload can be, I might do it. But honestly, after 3-4 years, most of my clients, I just got an email from Kentucky this morning, and he was like, this is absolutely incredible. He's a seed customer, not a consulting client. So getting back to the fertilizer, people have emailed me and called me and said, hey, I read about this in Peterson's Bow Hunting, this new product. It says that you don't need fertilizer for your product. What a scam. How do you do that? That's not what I said. What we should say is we're getting back to allowing nature to cycle nutrients and allowing energy flow to work the way it's supposed to work. It sounds crazy, but it's just really simple. So let me give you an example. 15 to 18 different species in spring reload, changed it every year. There's major plant functional groups to cycle virtually every nutrient we could possibly need. We're reestablishing relationships with a lot of the microbiology, the microbes in the soil, right? So I think by now everybody kind of knows how the 5th grade science works on this. Because of photosynthesis, plants can do their thing, right? Chlorophyll, everybody remembers that. I won't get into C6, H12O6 and all the complicated stuff, but the sun shines, the rain falls, the plant has chlorophyll. Because of plants, we're all here. If that stops, it's over. Down beneath our boots, there's a whole new world down there. It's an entirely different world that just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Microbiologists study it constantly. In fact, all the drugs you take, the stuff that makes you feel good or makes you feel better, whatever, come out of a chemical in the soil. So yes, when you go out there and dig in the soil and the dirt, that's why you feel good. That's why you love the smell of it, because pharmaceuticals come from it. So the microbes down there are coming and feeding off the root exudates, right? Carbon and all kind of acids, organic goodness are leaking from the roots and feeding those microbes. Those microbes can't come up, not all of them, can't come up out of the soil and live. They can't survive, right? So the plant is up here photosynthesizing and it basically giving the currency of carbon and all these acids to the microbes. The microbes are in turn, because in nature, there is no welfare system, right? There's no entitlement like we have in America now, or really all over the world. So everything is symbiotic, it's complementary, and it works. It's self-regulating, it's self-healing. So the plants are taking this currency of root exudates, giving it to the microbes. That's how they survive. In exchange, as a thank you, the microbes are bringing all of these nutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, zinc, manganese, all of this stuff that I take supplements in because our food system is completely void of all of these. Magnesium, especially zinc, I take that a lot. So you've got this system that's working, right? Well, we've gone in there with plowing, with tillage, with chemicals, with disturbance, with monoculture, with whatever, and we've basically interrupted that pattern, that cycle. So we come in with synthetics and we feed synthetic fertilizers. The microbes and the plants no longer need that relationship. Now, a lot of your synthetic, or if not all of it, is going through a microbe at some point anyway. But because we're planting monocultures or low diversity, we now have a lower profile of root exudates. So we're interrupting that system. So this is a really long way of saying, why would we continue to put synthetics in the ground that are disrupting that relationship, right? So I know some people say, no, you should wean. I don't know if you listened to the podcast with Haney. He said, don't be a weaner. So that's kind of like our joke is, I'm not a weaner. I'm going to, because I understand how the system is, I'm going all in, right? Now, if we were in the production ag space, you probably would have to wean slowly until you get your soils to that point where you can produce an acceptable, I hate to say the word yield, but yeah, we're not doing that for wildlife. We're simply looking to provide nutrient-dense forage, and nutrient-dense forage does not come from synthetic fertilization. Nutrient-dense forage comes from letting nature cycle and do it nature's way. So again, I'm not going to fault anyone if they say, hey, I'm going to go out there and put a little bit of fertilizer in the ground, but you're just extending the weaning process or the priming process by putting it out there, because it's like me trying to shake your hand and some defensive lineman in the middle trying to keep, me from shaking your hand. Well, if he wasn't there, we have a clear path to reestablishing that bond, and then moving forward, we have that relationship. So again, I know guys do it. I can't say I talk to a lot of them. Most of the people who email me and say, hey, you're not going to believe what the turkey population has done on my place in 3 years. Or look at this plot. I know it may not look good, which to me it looks amazing. They say, but we have killed more deer than we ever have. We can't keep them off the thing. And I really don't know what they're eating, and I don't care. And when I get inquisitive and start asking about the specifics, I say, how much fertilizer? And they go, well, none. You said not to put any on it, right? So again, they were designed to be able to get back to prime the biology and get back to that point. Biology is resilient. It's going to come back. Having said that, your first year spring reload plot is going to look completely different from my first year spring reload plot, right? Because we're in two completely different parts of the country, two different soils, just different things going on, have had different management applied to them in the past. I've seen some first year, zero synthetics, zero burn down, spring reload plots. It's like they had a selective herbicide to kill everything but spring reload. It just blows my mind. So how's it doing that? How does that happen? And why nobody's asking that question is beyond me.
I'm going to back up on our conversation. One of the podcasts I listened to, you were talking, it might have been with Zach. You were talking about when we were going with the roller, the crimper situation. I believe whoever you were speaking to mentioned that they go in and mow it. What's your thoughts on mowing before you plant the next reload?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when we're mowing, obviously when you get rid of chemicals, let me back up. So when I was at Mississippi State, I remember one class we learned about mechanical weed control, chemical weed control, and cultural weed control. And we spend 99.5% of our time on mechanical and chemical. And I remember sitting there going, I don't have any notes for cultural. What am I going to write down? And I asked, and they were like, well, cultural is more about, using your head, using your management to get ahead of, blah, blah, et cetera. So in that situation, you're using what you have at your disposal, which is a mechanical form, obviously with preferably minimal disturbance to the soil. So if you had cows, it would be even better because they would dung, urine, drool all over your field, and it would be more like nature wants, dropping microbe. I know these days we're scared of viruses and microbes, and oh my gosh, don't touch the door handle. Actually, I don't want other people's funk. I'm game on that, but we're super scared of that. But the soil welcomes that, right? It wants microbes in the dung and the urine and the drool. But you're out there mowing. I do mow, not a lot. But I mow now usually to scalp like a clover plot. So things we used to think, oh man, when I remember a client of mine saying, I mow on the holidays, right? So So it was like Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, kind of a plan. And it was when people tried to mow the grasses out of their clovers, they'd say, well, you can't, make sure you don't hit the clover in the middle of summer because if you scalp it, you stunt it, stress it, blah, 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 all that stuff. So to me now, I use those tools to my advantage, right? So let me give you an example. So if the summer's drawing on and I know I'm getting closer to, July and August, I'll use the hot, dry days to my advantage to scalp the heck out of a plot. I might even give it another 5 or 6 days, 7 days to try to come back and scalp it again and just stress it. And in that time period, sometimes I'll take 2 or 3 days to drill into that plot, right? So I'm trying to get it planted while I'm intentionally stunting or stressing the existing plant structure. I don't have a problem if that ladino comes back next year, or even in the fall a little bit with my brassicas and cereals and forbs. But I want to try to knock a lot of it back so I can get a new plant profile going. So yeah, I don't have a problem with mowing. I've seen guys have the most beautiful plot that's ready to be crimped. It is multi-species. Everything looks like it would probably get an 80+% crimp termination, and they mow it, and I'm just like, oh, and they have a crimper on site. And I'm like, I don't think that was the right tool, but hey, it's all, whatever, move forward. Let's keep going. So yeah, I don't have a problem with it. But if I can get a good crimp termination, and by that, good is relative. Sometimes I'm happy with a 50% crimp termination because to me, again, that's like a herd of buffalo or bison coming through, or deer or goats, and kind of doing their thing to half the plot. To me, that's ideal. And what we're seeing is deer don't care either.
Yeah, and ultimately that's what we're all planting food plots for, is it have more deer.
Yeah, I primarily did all this for deer, but the species that are rebounding the fastest after 6, 7 full years are the upland birds and the insectivore type species. Turkeys are absolutely exploding. I don't think we're out mowing as much, number one, to destroy nests or disturb hens on nests. Yes, we do crimp, but I haven't run over any nests or had any issues with that, or fawns. But just the insects, the sheer number of insects, the diversity of insects is just absolutely mind-blowing, and the turkeys are exploding. And I do think the chemicals, everybody is looking for one thing to blame on, and I realize I'm going to get emails, hey, our turkey population is great down here, Jay. That's awesome. Enjoy it, because it's not going to be there forever. But I think the chemicals have obviously had a huge negative impact on turkey populations.
My next question here, you'll probably have to go on for a while to answer it, but
no, I don't do that.
So if I go ahead of the spring reload this spring, your temperature is 45 or better. I guess when would I be looking to do the summer reload? When we're looking at doing the fall reload? And then even further into that is, what do I do the following year? I mean, do we look at, and I know one of the podcasts you talked about is maybe doing part of it in a monoculture or putting something else into another area to break things up. So what do you think about all that?
Well, first of all, you're out of time. Put more quarters in. But this is where, I always tell people, remember that this is, I don't want to say it's a new system, but we're all still learning, right? So this is what's so cool about having a huge network of customers and users out there, and being small enough to react and respond quickly enough. I mean, if we had a conversation now, I could make a blend as soon as we hang up and have it on the website ready, in 20 minutes. But so we like to innovate and keep products coming for different times of the year with that. And that's why Squatch came out last year, because we are learning, right? There's been no one ahead of us. I was the first idiot who said, I'm going to bring diverse biological primers, cover crops to the wildlife world and focus on feeding the soil instead of just feeding the deer, right? Everyone else still talks about let's just feed the deer. I think some people use it, we're going to feed the soil to feed the deer. They think it sounds sexy, but I don't think they buy in as much as I do or understand it, because I've been out there watching and observing all over the country. It's absolutely incredible what we're seeing. But when I started, Gabe Brown and I talked about different blends several years ago. I told him what I wanted, and he was willing to just give me his input, and I ended up with one reload product. It was basically going to be a summertime reload or a growing season reload that led into fall, right? So this is kind of the evolution of this thought process. I wanted sequential plantings. I wanted to plant ahead of fall, and it was all about building up for the fall and trying to prime the biology, cycle the nutrients, put it in the organic fraction, and a whole number of objectives. And then I got it done. I was like, Gabe, this isn't going to work, because hell, there's 10 to 12 species here that aren't going to be quite ready to be planted in the spring when I need to get ahead of the weed profile. And then there's other species that are kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum. So then I decided I'm going to do a spring and summer in order to lead into my fall. And for the first 2 years, myself and many of my clients used the spring right into summer, right into fall. And what we learned quickly was it just depends. There's a sweet spot in the country where that works really well. In other parts of the country, maybe we were asking too much from nature. Not that there was any negative effects. It still did fine. And actually, we still do it. And I still recommend going those 3 if it's in the budget and in your schedule. But the second year, I thought to myself, okay, we can't keep doing that pattern, because nature, in my mind, we don't know, again, because no one's ever done this, but nature is I don't say smart enough, but intuitive enough to pick up on our patterns, right? Like patterning a mature buck. So I feel like we need to do something else here. We need to, manipulate our plant timing. So that's when we started really getting into heavier biennials in fall reload, and then fall nourishment was kind of like, okay, if you're not really going to hunt it primarily, if this is kind of a plot in the fall that you're going to think ahead, plant for spring, let's go a little bit heavier on the smother crops, the biennials that are going to come back in the spring, and get started with this, with fall nourishment. And then we started planting fall nourishment thinking, that may not be as attractive as fall reload. And then clients were calling me going, holy crap, they're crushing my fall nourishment. And I was like, it shouldn't happen, because people said that deer don't eat, hairy vetch and cereal rye. And of course we had a lot of other things in it. But so, I like changing it up. I'm not against constantly, whether you call it relay cropping or whatever you want to call it, spring, summer, fall. But I do like to try to, if last year you went spring, summer, fall, then this year let that fall go. It may or may not, depending on your winter and depending on the success of your establishment, and maybe if you planted it early enough or not, it may or may not come back dense enough this spring, right? So what I used to do, and I still do, is I'd go out in the spring anyway and put in like my oats and peas product, or put in buckwheat and oats, or go right back in with spring reload sometimes. And then I would let what's maturing mature, and then hit it, in June, depending on where you're at. It could be May in some parts, July in other, and drill in summer, or drill in summer squash, excuse me. There's so many different options you can do, but as human beings are always looking for like the schedule. I don't like schedules. So I like game time decisions, right? I like to be in the game, looking at the situation, looking at the play clock, the soil temps, what it looks like. I'm scouting my fields constantly. What does it look like? I'm digging holes. I'm looking at how much of my plants actually are going to come back this year. Oh crap, maybe I planted it too deep. So some of my species are coming back somewhat decent, but the other ones aren't necessarily coming back. So then I may go in and boost it. And you've just thrown a curveball at nature, right? In that now you've got fall coming back, you're introducing spring or oats and peas, and you may let it drag all the way on until fall, or I say fall. A lot of our fall plots, we are now planting early. So we've had really good success in a broad portion of, I guess, the gut of the country. Northern extremes a little different maybe, and southern extremes a little bit different. If you have questions, you can email me about that. But where we actually plant, we used to plant our fall products in, say, August 1st to the 15th. We are now planting them in July for a number of reasons. And I think I told this story before, but one of my clients, we accidentally sent him fall reload in a spring reload bag marked spring reload. He opened it up. He's a really good food plotter, has a lot of experience. I don't think this has happened beyond this, and it couldn't have happened to a better person because he knew it. He opened it up and he sent me a picture. He goes, "What is this?" I said, "That looks like fall reload." He's like, "Look at the tag. It says spring reload." I was like, "Oh crap." We sent him a new bag, and he's like, "You know what? I'm gonna plant it." Planted it in spring, and being observant and just watching, he was like, the deer are crushing it. I think it was in a pipeline area from the gas company. He said the deer absolutely annihilating fall reload in the spring. They continued to hit it all fall. And then on the opener of bow season, he killed the mature buck he watched feed in that thing all summer long. So, I guess that's kind of a story on observation and, just trying things and making mistakes and whatever, dealing with it. But yeah, so that's why we came out with Squatch last year, and we had used, those similar species for that same management practice. But what we were finding is some of the guys with really degraded soils, who were trying to get the diversity in it right away, maybe should have started with summer squatch as the soil temperatures warmed up a little bit in, say May, down in the South Carolina, Southeast, June, going across the Northeast, Midwest, getting summer squatch in, and it gets squatchy, it gets thick and tall, and that root structure in those quote unquote grasses is what is really priming the soil, building organic matter, and obviously covering the heck out of the soil. And then we lay that down and plant our fall right into that. So you have multiple options. And for the guys who have been with us the whole time, we're already ahead of the curve, and many of them are getting, anywhere from 10 to 150 acres of, I don't want to call it custom blends, but we're having to continue to innovate and try new things.
Yeah.
You were right when you said this could be a long-winded.
Yeah. I think, I'll be honest with you, I think I'm about out of questions.
Yeah. And you made me go an hour. I told you I wouldn't do it this time, and you laughed, but yeah. Well, good deal. I appreciate you taking the time, and I know we had a brief conversation the first time, and I was like, we should be recording this. You're asking good questions.
I appreciate it. I mean, it was good. You're very informative, and it was great. I'm glad you invited me to do this.
Well, good deal. I appreciate that, and we'll look forward to following your success or frustrations or whatever you come across. And excellent, good stuff. All right.
Thank you, Jason.
Yep, Dan. I'll let you go. Thanks a lot. Stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Yep. Bye-bye. Okay, I'm just going to shoot a real brief outro on this one. I did get a huge response on that first one. I've been wanting to do this sort of series from the field for a long time, and just never really have. So For anybody out there who is in a different part of the country and really just wants to talk about their specific problems in their part of the country, by all means, let me know, and we'll take them one at a time. So, all right, I want to thank everybody for listening, and have a great one.